Ready for a deep dive into some ancient wisdom? We're cracking open Seneca's letters. They are seriously packed with insights, you guys.
Oh, absolutely. And what's so intriguing about Seneca is that he was this total powerhouse in Roman society, playwright, advisor to emperors, even got exiled for a bit, but he was always kind of poking at the values of that society.
Right. Like he was whispering subversive wisdom from right under the noses of the emperors.
Exactly.
But he starts off with this thing about language, almost like he's frustrated with it.
Yeah, it's like, how do you put those really big thoughts into words, especially the ones about life and how to live it? Seneca really felt that struggle. He even talks about how everyday words can just vanish.
Like that old Roman word for gadfly he mentions. It's gone.
It makes you think, right? What words are we using now that'll just sound bizarre centuries from now? And this whole language thing, it wasn't just Seneca. Lots of ancient thinkers were wrestling with it. How do you describe reality when language is so limited?
So where does that lead Seneca? This frustration with language.
Straight to the heart of philosophy, he was massively into Plato, especially that whole idea of Plato's forms and ideas.
Okay, Plato's forms and ideas.
Yeah,
Maybe a little philosophy 101 recap is in order here.
right.
Seneca uses this example of a painter trying to capture the essence of Virgil the poet in a portrait.
Yeah, it's like the painter's trying to get at Virgil's wit, his soul, not just what he looked like, right?
Right.
So that core Virgilness, that's the idea, that perfect, unchanging essence.
Okay, so the idea is like the true essence of something. What about the actual painting then?
The painting, that's the form. The imperfect attempt to represent that idea in the real world with paint and canvas.
Got it. To use a modern example, the idea of a smartphone exists whether we have the word for it or not.
Right.
Then you got all these forms of smartphones.
Exactly. Different brands, designs are all trying to express that core idea, that smartphone-ness. And for Seneca, that's where language comes in or doesn't. We use words like good or truth, but are we really capturing the full essence of those things?
It's like we're always trying to squeeze these big concepts into little word boxes.
Right.
But Seneca wasn't just pointing out the problem. He offered a solution too, didn't he?
He did, and it went against the grain, especially for ancient Rome. Seneca believed that real happiness, what he called living well, didn't come from stuff, it came from virtue.
Virtue. Now that seems to be a cornerstone of his philosophy. But wasn't that a radical idea back then? I mean, Roman society was all about wealth and status.
Totally. Seneca was challenging the core of their values. He was saying true happiness, even wealth, came from who you were, not what you owned. That virtue was its own reward, no matter your circumstances.
That's a powerful statement. Inner character over outward appearances every time. How did he get this across, though? He wasn't exactly writing self-help books.
No, instead of some long, boring treatise, he used stories, real-life examples to make his point.
Yeah.
And one guy he talks about a lot is Cato the Younger.
Cato the Younger. Remind us who he was again.
So picture this. Cato, a famous Roman leader, powerful guy, right?
Wow.
Totally content with just one horse. Simple food. He embodied virtue, didn't care about flashy wealth and status.
Hold on. A leader in Roman society, famous for simplicity. That's pretty countercultural.
Exactly. And that's Seneca's point. He's making us rethink what's important. Are we finding our worth in possessions, external validation? Or like Cato, are we content with simplicity, with living a virtuous life?
It's not about rejecting ambition, but understanding what truly satisfies.
Right.
And it seems like Seneca was concerned about people making their lives way too complicated.
Oh, totally. He even criticizes people who were obsessed with candlelight. They were turning night into day. Like, relax, it's okay to have some darkness.
It's like he's saying, stop chasing more, and appreciate the natural rhythms of life already. Am I getting that right?
You got it. But Seneca wasn't about just criticizing. He wanted to offer a path to a better life. And that path, it started within. Self-examination, cultivating virtue, all that good stuff.
All right, so how do we do that? With our imperfect language and our modern-day distractions, how do we actually apply these ancient ideas? And what about that whole thing Seneca said about the most unfortunate people being the most fortunate? How does that work?
Good questions. And luckily for us, we've got 2 more parts to this deep dive to unpack it all.
Back for more Seneca.
That last part really got me thinking, especially that whole thing about misfortune actually being a path to a more fulfilling life. Kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does seem like a paradox, doesn't it? But it goes to the core of what Seneca's saying. Remember, he was all about true happiness not coming from external stuff.
Right, not wealth, health, status. Exactly. All those things can disappear in a flash.
So true happiness comes from within.
Hmm.
cultivating virtue. But where does misfortune fit into all of this?
Well, imagine someone who's always had everything handed to them, every comfort, every advantage. Do they ever even think to look beyond those things for happiness?
They might just assume that those fleeting pleasures, that's it, that's happiness.
Exactly. But then someone who's faced hardship, who's struggled,
They've had to confront the fact that the material world can't give you lasting happiness.
and maybe in losing those things or facing the possibility of loss, they discover a different kind of happiness, something deeper.
The happiness that comes from resilience, from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you.
That's it. Seneca's suggesting that sometimes you need to lose it all, or at least face that possibility, to appreciate what you can't lose. Your inner strength, your ability to navigate the ups and downs.
What do you think Seneca would make of our world today, with all the emphasis on stuff, on looking good online?
Oh, I think he'd have a lot to say about that. Social media especially, it's like we're constantly looking for validation from outside ourselves, measuring our worth by likes and followers and all that.
And maybe missing out on that inner strength, that quiet contentment that Seneca valued so highly,
It's about finding that balance, right?
right?
Not rejecting the world and everything in it, but not getting swept up in it either.
Balance. There's that word again. Not getting so caught up in chasing external things that you forget about the inner work.
Yeah, Seneca believed that real wealth was about needing less, not having more. It was about being content with simplicity, living in tune with nature, building a strong character.
It's so easy to say, so hard to do. I mean, I'm bombarded with ads every day. New phone, new clothes, new this, new that.
Yeah,
It takes real effort to step back from that and think, wait, what do I actually need to be happy?
it does take effort. Even Seneca admitted that. The path to virtue, it's a lifelong journey, and it takes self-reflection. It takes asking yourself, what am I chasing after, and is it actually making me happy?
Aligning your actions with your values, living intentionally.
That's it.
But if we're always focused on the perfect Instagram post, the next promotion at work, do we ever give ourselves the space for that kind of reflection?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Finding that mental space in our busy, distracting world. But Seneca reminds us that it's worth it. That inner work, that's what leads to true, lasting happiness, the kind that can get you through anything.
Powerful stuff. But we haven't circled back to Seneca's thoughts on language yet. He starts by pointing out its flaws, its limitations, but then he chooses to express his ideas through, not language, through writing.
Interesting point, and that's exactly where we'll pick up in part 3 of this deep dive.
Beck again. So we've been really digging into Seneca's ideas about virtue, happiness, that inner strength thing. But we started this whole deep dive with his take on language, how it's limited.
Right.
It's almost like a paradox, you know? Here's this philosopher, but he's wrestling with the very tools of his trade. How did he make peace with that?
It's a really interesting part of his thinking, isn't it? Because he knows, he totally gets that language is flawed. Words can only go so far in describing reality,
Right.
but he doesn't just give up on language altogether.
It's not like he just throws his hands up in the air and is like, well, forget it then.
No way! Seneca knew how powerful language could be. Just look at his letters. He was so good at weaving together those philosophical insights with imagery, stories, stuff people can relate to.
It's almost like he's saying, yeah, language has limits, but it's the best tool we've got to even try to talk about these things.
Right.
It's like a craftsman who knows their tools aren't perfect, but they still use them to create amazing stuff.
That's a great analogy. Remember that painter trying to capture Virgil's essence? No matter how good the painting is, it'll never be the full Virgil, right? But the artist is still trying to convey something of his essence using the tools that he has.
So Seneca's telling us to be aware of the limitations of language, not to mistake the word for the real thing. But he's also showing us how powerful it can be. It lets us reflect, look inward, get a glimpse of something bigger.
I think that's where his genius is. He's not giving us the answers, he's using language to spark something in us, to get us thinking, to start us on our own journey of figuring things out.
So it's not about finding all the answers in his words. It's about letting his words, light the way so we can find our own path to the good life.
Exactly. And that journey, like we've been saying, it's a process, right? It takes work. Cultivating virtue, looking for wisdom, finding contentment in the simple things. Remembering that real happiness isn't about the stuff you have, it's about what's going on in your own mind.
This has been amazing. Seneca's ideas are so relevant, even all these centuries later.
They really are. And maybe that's how you know it's real wisdom, when it can reach across time and still resonate with people.
Totally. And on that note, I think we should leave our listeners with something to chew on, something inspired by Seneca himself.
I like it.
What do you think Seneca would make of our world today? I mean, everyone's chasing more and more and more. They want to look good online, but they're constantly distracted. Would he see us like those Romans, burning the candle at both ends, looking for happiness in all the wrong places?
Wow, that's a really good question. And maybe by thinking about Seneca, by thinking about his ideas, we can start to find our own answers, our own path to a better, more fulfilling life.
I love that. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing world of Seneca. Until next time, keep searching, keep asking those tough questions, and keep living intentionally.